Welcome to the March 2014 edition of the VolunteerMatch Solutions Best Practice Network webinar series, Lessons from the Field, Employee Volunteer Program Managers' Top Tips for Success. My name is Lauren Wagner, and I'm the Senior Manager of Engagement at VolunteerMatch, and I'm going to be helping to facilitate this morning's session. So before we get started, I wanted to go through a few housekeeping items. We're going to try our best. We have a lot to get through today, so we're going to try our best to hold some time at the end for questions from the audience. So as we're going through this morning's presentation, you can submit your questions in a few different ways. The first is by typing them into the questions box on the right side of your screen through the GoToWebinar interface, or you can also submit them via Twitter by tweeting them to @VM_solutions using the hashtag VMVPN. So as I mentioned, we'll kind of keep those coming in throughout the webinar and hold them till the end. Hopefully we'll have time to pose those to the presenters at the end this morning, but if we don't worry, we will have all of them on file and try to follow up with you guys individually. Last but certainly not least, we will be sharing a copy of the slides as well as a link to the recorded webinar after the event. So you're going to get all of this great information for your records afterwards. So this morning's topic of talking to our specific employee volunteer program managers and hearing what their tips for people who are kind of stepping into this role of managing employee volunteer programs is something that we've been wanting to do for a while. And when we were, speaking with our presenters and really brainstorming on these different kind of tips that they would tell somebody, we noticed that they kind of fell into three different categories. So what we're going to be doing this morning is looking at these three larger kind of program tips and then looking at them and how they've been implemented in 4 different programs. So we're going to be hearing, like I mentioned, 4 different programs, so 4 different presenters this morning. First, we're going to be hearing from Alex Price, who's the Manager of CSR and Community Relations at ADT and part of the team that manages the ADT Always Cares program. We'll also be hearing from Aaron Dietrich, who's the Director of Corporate Citizenship at NetSuite and manages their Suite Volunteer and Suite Impact teams. We also have Jessica Johnson on the call, who's the Manager of Reputation and Social Impact at Prometheus Real Estate Group and part of the team that manages their Our Front Porch program. And last but certainly not least, we have Kate Wessel, who is the Manager of CSR at JetBlue and manages their Community Connections program. And we're also very fortunate to have Aaron and Jessica actually in the office with us today because they are local to the Bay Area. So thanks everybody for being on the call, and thanks to Aaron and Jessica for being in the office. So as I mentioned, we're going to be diving into kind of these 3 different ideas, but from 4 different perspectives. So I thought it would be really helpful to start off with a little bit of background on each of the programs. So I'm going to have each of our employee volunteer program managers introduce themselves and their programs. So to get us started, we're going to have Alex tell us a little bit about the ADT Always Cares program. Are you on the call, Alex?
Yeah, thanks a lot, Lauren. Hi, everybody. So I lead community relations for ADT. You probably know us as the category leader in home security and home automation throughout North America. And as you can see on the screen there, we've been around for a really long time. The ADT brand has been around. Actually, we're celebrating our 140th birthday this summer. So one of the oldest American brands that there is, continuous brands that there is. And really, despite our size, place in our industry and long history, it really wasn't until we spun off from our parent company about 1.5 years ago and became an independent company ourselves that we made a definitive commitment, a company-wide commitment to service and to giving and really making it a part of our company ethos. So we're new at this, so it's an interesting time to be talking with you all today. But our program, that really came to life through ADT Always Cares. That's our signature service program that was launched just this past summer, about 8 months ago. It's a company-wide, so and it focuses both on employee volunteerism and employee-directed philanthropy, which go hand in hand for us. But you're catching me halfway through the rollout. We've launched in our 7 largest employee markets, about half our employee base, and we're ramping up for the next phase with the second half of our employee base between now and the end of the summer. So we're midway through, and working with VolunteerMatch has been, integral to this rollout. But I think one of at the core of all this is really trying to develop our employees at all levels, at all departments, into becoming great community leaders, and investing in them through this program which actually it sits on a platform of really robust committee platform where through a competitive application process, 17,000 employees across the company apply to be part of our councils in what will be 200 cities across North America when we're finally rolled out. So we're really investing in our leaders out in the field to carry this program from headquarters throughout our 200 communities.
Great. Thanks, Alex. So Erin, can you tell us a little bit about the programs at NetSuite?
Sure. Thanks again for having me. I'm excited to be here today. So NetSuite is the global leader of cloud computing business management software, and we were founded in 1999. But in 2007, when the company went public, our founder had a moment where he thought, we're making an enormous change in these companies who are using our software, and we could do the same thing for nonprofits if they were able to use our software. So he decided to begin our CSR arm, which we call NetSuite.org. And the way that the NetSuite.org program has really matured over time is that it has dovetailed over two specific components. So one is using our technology and our product to help nonprofits and social enterprises be able to really make discounts that we give to nonprofits, and then also social solutions like donor management that we create specifically for nonprofit clients. And then the other side of it is how do we tap into these incredible employees that we have around the world, and how do we get the employees really making a huge difference in the communities that they live and work in, but also in the global community. And so volunteer program, every quarter Sweet Volunteers actually ramps up and launches again, and we match employees with grantees, and they take on pro bono programs over the course of that quarter. And then our Sweet Impact teams, and these are our hands-on volunteer teams. They're managed out of each of our 22 global offices. And those are the two programs that I spend a great deal of my time focused on, and that is what we're going to talk about today.
Awesome. Thank you, Erin. And Jessica, tell us a little bit about Prometheus.
Hi, everyone. Thanks for having me here today. My name is Jessica. As Lauren has said, I'm the Reputation and Social Impact Manager for Prometheus. Now, who is Prometheus? Not to be confused with the building properties on the West Coast. We were founded in 1965, and our goal is really to create a deeper sense of home for our tenants that we fondly refer to as neighbors, that goes away from a traditional living experience. So the term slumlord is not something that we are in line with. Our desire to give back, as you see here on the slide, at Prometheus, we're a Healer Foundation. Their causes are focused on education, science, and the arts, and while the company and foundation remain very separate entities, 30% of the money we earn as a company goes towards these philanthropic endeavors. Up until recently, this really huge source of pride for us was not shared by our owners because we really believe in that show don't tell philosophy, meaning do the work because it's the right thing to do. So in 2011, Prometheus actually launched our very own homegrown volunteer program named Our Front Porch. Recently, we expanded the Porch program from our employee base of about 650 Prometheus to include passions, bring that passion to their properties and regions that they actually live, work, and plan.
Great. Thanks, Jessica. And Kate, tell us a little bit about what CSR and volunteering looks like at JetBlue.
Sure. So I wish I was in California with everyone else. It's cold here in New York. But JetBlue, and as we're a service industry, that has just always been ingrained in our corporate culture. Our values are safety, caring, fun, integrity, and passion, and our crew members continue to do that inside the airport and outside in the communities that we work and live. So we began our program by our official program in 2006 and really worked on getting our name out in the community. And I'm sure similarly to a lot of programs, we did as much as we could without much thought into the overarching strategy. So we got our name out there with first. We had a very disjointed program, and we started figuring out ways to get our crew members together, which is when we launched Community Connections. And that is a program similarly to many of your volunteer efforts where we connect our crew members and corporate giving through a reward and recognition program. So for every 25 hours, our crew members. And then in 2011, we decided to really drill down our strategy and are focusing on youth and education, the environment, and have a clear outlined strategy in those 3 areas.
Great. Thanks so much, Kate. So now we have a little bit of context. We're going to start diving into these actual, 3 big tips that I was talking about earlier. So tip number 1, build a focused and strategic but flexible program. So what we're talking about here really is this idea of, and it really is kind of a change over time that you'll see. I mean, you saw it in the timeline that Kate just shared, but it's this concept of taking your company's mission, your company's values, but allowing at the same time and kind of walking that line between keeping it focused and strategic, but also allowing it to be flexible enough so that your employees, no matter where they are, can really take that program and implement it for themselves in a way that makes sense for their community. So to get started with tip number 1 and seeing how this kind of goes into effect.
As a refresher, those are our hands-on volunteer teams in all 22 of our NetSuite global offices. One of the things I should mention about NetSuite is that we're a rapidly growing company. So we have about 2,600 global employees right now, and to give everybody a reference point, when I started with the company a little less than 2 years ago, we had 1,300. So we've already more than doubled in size in the time that I've been here, which is actually one of the really big keys about how we decided to build these programs. Flexible, I think, is probably the biggest, most important word. Especially bold with your program and adapt it to all of these new employees as they're coming on board. So Suite Impact Teams was something that we knew was important to kick off because we wanted to figure out a way to formalize the way that employees were volunteering in their offices or organization, but it wasn't really formalized. So what we really wanted to do was create a corporate program with some corporate goals, but something that was very flexible and could be localized by leaders in each of our offices. I think when we started, one of the most important things that we realized is that one size really doesn't fit all. When you're looking at different employee populations around the world, you have different cultural components to think about, you have different locations to think about, even different seasons, and reverse calendars. We said, hey, August would be a great time to work on kids and education because kids are going back to school, and then that as much as you want to create one clear vision from the top, you're going to have to allow it to really flex in each of your offices. I think one of the first keys is just creating some top-line goals. For us, we knew we couldn't do everything from the start, so the really biggest goal was having a hands-on volunteer opportunity in every office throughout the year. We also knew that by doing that, we could create a really solid platform of engagement in each office where every NetSuite employee knew that giving back to the community was something that the company cared about, they had, seen the program happening, whether they had been able to participate in it yet or not. And that was a really important thing for us. And then we figured out, how the program would work, and that'll look different for every company. So, what we decide to do at NetSuite will be different from what ADT did and JetBlue did and Prometheus did. But once we figured that out and what that outline and strategy looked like, we really took that plan on a roadshow to all of our local executives and all of our top executives to walk them through the plan and get their endorsement and their feedback. And then we did a formal campaign launch from our CEO so that every NetSuite employee, no matter where they worked, whether they were remote or in an office, heard about the program and knew how they could get involved in it. And we recruited local ambassadors. And you guys are going to hear us all talk about local ambassadors or local champions a lot today. I think it's a huge key in having a flexible but focused program. These are people who are going to take your vision and actualize it and localize it in their offices. And finally, we did a lot of training and created a really robust toolkit of branding and T-shirts and rules and suggestions for each of our local ambassadors. So if you go to the next slide, you'll see kind of how we decided to actualize this. So we got our local ambassadors in each office to take the lead on taking our global vision and making it local. And we decided that there were a few key things that we really wanted to maintain control over. So for us, those were the overall goals of the program, some cause themes. We wanted every office to be working on the same cause themes, and we actually let those cause themes be directed by our employees. We had employees in every office vote on what causes they cared the most about, and then we rolled that up and picked 4 causes that mattered the most to NetSuite employees globally. We really cared about branding, and we wanted to make sure that the look and the feel of the program was the same in every office. We also cared about training, so we did a lot of training, and I'm constantly revising and refreshing our training for our ambassadors to make sure that they all know how to find a good charity partner, how to run a good volunteer event, and what to do afterwards in order to maintain engagement. So it's not just employees sign up and they go to the event and then afterwards nothing else happens. How do you be critical to everybody having the same process, look and feel, and for you being able to report on what's happening? But then we thought, okay, those are what we want to control, but there's a lot of stuff we can give up and let be controlled locally. So, who the charity partners are, what the type of event is, when the events are happening, what the campaign looks like. All of those things are things that my ambassadors take the lead on are these 3 images at the bottom of the screen. So one of our themes is health, and these are 3 examples of how different teams got behind the idea of volunteering for health. So a couple offices did a blood drive. This is a picture of one of our ambassadors giving blood in the Denver office for the Children's Hospital. A couple of our offices in Asia actually ran and hosted their own charity events for a health organization, which I thought was amazing and just showed how much they really cared about kind of making this locally customized. So in Singapore, they actually ran a stand-up comedy night where one comedy night went towards a health charity that they had aligned with. And then in, I believe that's our Hong Kong office, they worked with the Cancer Association there who was making care kits for kids, and so they needed them to put together these kits with bears and ribbons, and they did that actually in the office over a lunch break. So 3 different offices, 3 very different approaches to the idea of kind of do something for health, and here's the framework, and they all came up with their own ideas.
That's awesome. No, that's great. And I think kind of an interesting takeaway here is almost kind of the idea of like defining your battles. So which parts of your program need to really be more rigid and which parts can be really flexible, and kind of defining that up front before you're kind of teaching the rest of your employees about it.
Absolutely. And then just remembering to keep adapting.
Right.
You may have one great idea. This thing should be defined from corporate, and then keep it flexible and continue to evolve and continue to assess what's working and what's not working.
Awesome. I love it. Thank you so much. All right, so Alex, can you tell us a little bit about what focus and flexibility looks like at ADT?
Absolutely. So looking back 2 years ago, which is when we started developing the concept of our program, Always Cares, really relevant issues for us, and have a really solid structured foundation to the program, but also needing to be very highly relevant to our local markets, personalized to the nuances of each employee base. So we felt like you really needed to have some key areas that we would focus on through our service and philanthropy that was aligned with our business. And, you know, kind of unique to us is local heroes or first responders. A lot of companies don't delve into this, but it makes so much sense for us because we send police, fire, and EMS personnel into harm's way every day, and we're part of triggering that response. And so we really want to respect and honor and in many ways recognize the men and women who do that. And so about 25% of our programming we decided would be focused on that issue. Actually, an issue that we learned through research was hit disproportionately hard during the financial crisis. So there was a lot of support needed there, and we wanted to be one of the few companies to really kind of drive support in those areas. And so, so I would encourage you all who are in the program development stage or are kind of looking to re-envision your program to seek out an area or two that really makes sense, that will resonate highly with your employee base. There's a lot of things you can learn by delving into an issue or two, and kind of to gain in-house knowledge and external credibility with a specific community. It's been great for us to make inroads with first response and in our various markets as well as nationally. And those relationships that we're building through our service are able to really be great business relationships to have for our organization in general. So it really makes a lot of sense. But beyond considering focusing on specific relevant issues, I feel like your program does need to be focused from a structural standpoint, and that kind of starts with policies and procedures. If you're at that level of defining your program, to really get specific in terms of what your program, what are the do's and don'ts, what are the policies of what activities will fit within your program, have it approved by your legal department, have it posted on your intranet so that everyone in your company can really have access to that, and there's no confusion of what that is. So I think you need to be real focused on defining the program from a policy perspective. And then also, I think one thing that we learned is that we needed to get very focused on teaching. Volunteerism 101, if you want to call it that, but not assuming that here at headquarters we're spending a lot of our days delving into great service and great volunteerism, but out in the field that's not necessarily the case. So we really had to invest, and I would encourage you to, in in-person or webcast boot camp training. What is a great volunteer event? What's a local charity partner that really makes sense for a particular office? And just define that at a very specific level. I think we went into this, we kind of assumed some things, and we learned that we really need to get back to basics when rolling out a program. And so we've done that. And I think VolunteerMatch helps you stay focused too, right? To have a very consistent, excellent user experience that's consistent throughout the company when signing up for and getting involved in volunteer events. And so volunteer category so that local employees can get involved in causes that are really pertinent to that locality, which I think is really important. And then also make sure that you get that you survey your employees in a local area to find out what causes or what types of events would be really meaningful to them, and then incorporate that feedback. So I think that flexibility, local flexibility, is very key.
All right, thanks so much, Alex. Sorry about that, everybody. It looks like we lost the audio for just a second there, but it looks like we're back. So one thing I wanted to point out from when Alex was talking about, so the idea of kind of alignment of your program focus and your core business, I think the example of first responders and ADT is a really great example of that alignment. And also this concept of volunteerism 101 and really providing those examples of success to the rest of your employees. And we'll dive more into that in our second tip. But thank you so much, Alex, for going over that with us. So next we're going to have Jessica talk to us a little bit about what this looks like at Prometheus.
Perfect, thanks. So when we launched Porch, we had to be extremely structured with the amount of direction that we provided our Prometheans. We have a vision, we have a mission, we have a ton of values that our organization sees as being incredibly important. But what we realized as a major lesson is when you build out your volunteer program, you have to think organically. How can you tap into your employees' passions while focusing on one specific cause that's in line with your vision, mission, and values? And as you can see here, our passions are incredibly diverse. And as many of us in CSR know, you get a ton of requests on a daily basis to support a myriad of different projects. So where Porch really hit their sweet spot is being committed to building better communities in the areas that we operate in. So very early on we said, we're going to partner with organizations and nonprofits that have the same mission that we do in terms of a company strategy. So Habitat for Humanity, a local nonprofit by the name of Housing Industry Foundation, these are definitely causes that our Prometheans could get around, they get very excited about, and really one of the key pieces is they can show off their strong technical skills. So being able to show off your strong technical skills with a hammer and a hard hat on, because you're doing it all day at your job, and then actually being able to go and show off how skilled you are, on a volunteer project is key. In terms of natural and organic, it made a lot of sense in terms of duplication. So we have 4 different regions that we operate in. We need to be able to, as a sort of decentralized program, be able to make sure that those events can happen in all different areas. So homelessness and housing is definitely something that we can do. Recently, a Promethean expressed her desire to organize a build day. We did this in pouring rain. It was literally with Habitat for Humanity, and we were hammering on and sawing and literally got rained out midday. But what was very cool is we still ended up with about 50 people showing up, committed to being there, which really shows that it connected to them at a deeper level.
Awesome, thanks, Jessica. I think one thing to kind of pull out of what Jessica was talking about there, with this concept of focus and flexibility, really tapping into the passions of your employees and your communities while also looking at what makes sense for your company. So, what your company can really make an impact on that's also, a really core need and core cause of the communities where you're operating. Great. So, and then Kate, JetBlue. So let's talk about focus and flexibility at JetBlue.
Sure. And I apologize. There's a typo in my slide. It should be humanity. But, okay, so JetBlue, we were really lucky this year that our advertising team decided to move in a direction that would tie back to our business and what our brand promise is. So when JetBlue launched, our goal was to bring humanity back to air travel. And we've evolved to the point where we think that we've done a good job in providing a human experience on board, to the point where we want to inspire humanity throughout both the travel ribbon and the communities that we serve. So we worked with a couple groups to develop some litmus tests for both crew members and customers to figure out which areas are important, like was just mentioned. And the 3 areas that bubbled up were youth and education, environment, and community. Community was kind of our catch-all for everything, because you could tie things back to the community in almost any way, or say community doesn't, in this sense, we can't support blue-haired dogs on Saturdays because that isn't the community that we're looking to serve. And so that is like where our flexibility really lies. So we decided that we would dedicate 80% of our time to those 3 focus areas and then 20% to other areas, which I'm sure most of us are from small teams. And in the CSR area, we know that a lot of people are very passionate about these things, including senior leadership. And so our general giving area is really focused on those passions of our executive leadership team. And then so our 3 areas of focus, our foundation touches all 3 of them, as well as our volunteer platform, Community Connection. And we work across all functions with the Community Connection in youth and education and environment to address our corporate programs, like One Thing That Screen or So With Reading, and then allow our crew members to fulfill any service need that they see important in their community. So in San Diego, homelessness is a big issue, and our crew members are doing that there. In the Dominican Republic, they do a lot of beach cleanups because that's important to them. Autism has become a big area of focus for a number of our cities. So it's very flexible, and we encourage our crew members at each of their stations to find a way to find the least common denominator to get everyone involved.
Great, thanks so much, Kate. You know, I love the I think a really great takeaway from what you were just talking about here is, you know, first having kind of that one focus area that really is kind of a catch-all. So it's like the community focus area really allows for a lot of flexibility within your company and within, you know, your employees' different passions. And then also having that 80-20 model where 80% is really focused on those 3 focus areas and 20% is really, you know, allowing your employees to get creative and give back where they're most passionate about. So I think that those are some great takeaways there. Thanks so much. So tip number 2. So now that we have our focused and strategic but flexible programs in place, you want to grow those programs. So, you know, whether you're talking about scaling from one employee group to another employee group, starting at headquarters and then expanding to, you know, your employees across the nation or globally, or whether you're talking about, you know, taking a program that you've developed for your employees and then flipping it externally and engaging your customers. You know, one of the things that you really need to do is make sure that and Erin talked about this a little bit in the beginning as well, learning, you know, and understanding your different audiences, so your different groups that are going to be involved, understanding their differences, and then, you know, like Alice was talking about, kind of educating them about what volunteerism is to your company, what those focus areas are, and really making sure that everybody's on the same page as you're scaling these programs. So to get us started talking about scaling, we're going to have Kate hop back on and tell us a little bit about scaling programs at JetBlue.
Yes. Okay. So just to give you a better understanding of our employee base, we have 15,000 crew members. We probably have another few thousand business partners, as well as other consultants in and out of the air terminals. And we also consider our business partners like crew members, so any airport authority will work with them as well. Next thing is that we work for an airline, so all of our crew members get to fly for free on JetBlue and can fly at a significantly discounted rate on other airlines, which means a number of our crew members work and live in different cities, and they're not necessarily always ones that make the most sense. We have a ton of crew members that work in New York but live in Northern California. We also have crew members that work in the Caribbean but live in New York or Maine. So that also presents a bit of an issue for us when we're figuring out, do we get them involved in the community that they live in or the community that we work in? And those needs are vastly different when you consider that we're in both of the Americas and in areas that speak multiple languages as well. So that was our first area to focus on, and we figured out that crew members were really passionate about things that are near and dear to them. In this space, I think that people are really, really close to things that are personal to them, and it's very challenging when someone tells you a story that is quite touching and you say, you know, we can't support this because it doesn't fall within our 3 pillars. So we needed to figure out a way to avoid that and have a bit more flexibility. We also had a clear CSR mission that, like I said before, that doesn't always identify with crew member passions as well. And we had crew members that would not participate in the programming because it didn't touch their local community. So figuring out the work, so for us, we took a lot of pains to figure out where our crew members worked, where they lived, and how to get them alerts and updated on both events. And crew members also have this expectation that the corporate will support what's important to them because we value our crew members and we want to show that we care about things that are important to them. So that's kind of all the lessons that we learned in the rollout of the program over the first 4 or 5 years. So if we go to the teach slide, what we did when we started with Community Connection is we rolled out a comprehensive communication strategy. And the way that we got our crew members engaged is through the What's in It for Me model. And we created a lot of rewards and incentives to get crew members to just be aware of the Community Connection platform. So we're lucky that we work for an airline because we have hotel partners as well. So we gave getaways out. We did a massive mailing. So for everyone that signed up in the first 2 weeks, we sent out T-shirts, which I would not recommend unless you have a fulfillment center. We also had an area where we had like a volunteer spotlight where crew members could share their stories, and then it raised more awareness. And we had our C-suite team include messaging about it every other week for a while. And when initially we weren't partnered with VolunteerMatch, but when VolunteerMatch rolled out, we did a very similar thing as well. And the success of that is that we had the largest participation year over year that we've ever had. And when I say largest, like it almost doubled just because the communications plan was so effective. So as I mentioned in the last section, the community pillar was really set to align with their passions. And we always use this tagline, and I think that it helps our crew members know that we're investing in them. We always say Community Connection is a program we use to align our corporate giving with our crew member passions. And when we phrase it that way, it makes our crew members believe that we are investing in them and what is important in the beginning, but it hasn't stopped. We continue to promote all the results of our donations or matching gifts. If you go to our JetBlue Facebook page today, you can see a story about something that we did in Detroit. It's a video that's very touching, and we do that as much as we can. If there's a week without a CSR story, we will figure out a focus, and it's become such a point where it's important for our leaders to include in their messaging. So like if they realize that there hasn't been a CSR story in a week, then I'll get an email from the CEO's office saying like, what did we do in the community this week? How can we tell these stories? And these are crew members that are active and engaged in their community, and they represent JetBlue and execute our corporate programs as well as finding local nonprofits to build relationships with. And the CSR Liaison Program is one that we are also continuing to learn because it's important to get someone in those positions that is going to remain in that position. While we're teaching it, we also still have more to learn. And that's about it.
Great, thanks so much, Kate. Yeah, I think that one of the interesting things for JetBlue that really could be kind of taken back with everybody on the call is this idea of whenever you were talking about learning about your different groups of employees, that not all of them might work in the same community where they live. So that idea of keeping strong communications and making sure that people know what's going on in each of those communities and really knowing your employees well enough to know that not all of them are living and working. Tell us a little bit about scaling at ADT.
Sure. This is such a great topic. being extremely thoughtful and strategic about how you launch and how you scale your program, we think is really critical. And this idea, as you see here, kind of HQ versus work in a more HQ type of an environment, but interface with probably far more people, far more colleagues that would be out in the field. A lot of companies, a lot of you would fall into that. So we think it's really important to begin with just knowing your employee base and sort of analyzing the various aspects of your departments, of your offices, of your branches. Every organization is real different, and the bigger that you are, the more crucial this analysis is. So in our case, we have about 17,000 employees, and we learned, and I got to tell you, I learned through this process there were substantial differences between the different categories of employees. That kind of, and again, it plays back to the need to be flexible to accommodate these major differences in employees. And you can think about the differences between kind of corporate executive headquarters environment employees versus our large monitoring centers, which are 24/7 environments, shift working type environments, versus 100% commission sales and technician force. Technology, the differences in technology and scheduling, and think about this as you're thinking about your various divisions. In our case, we have thousands and thousands of employees that work in our monitoring centers, and because of the sensitive nature of what they do on a daily basis, they don't have regular access to the internet in front of their workstation, and they have limited use email addresses because of the fact that they're responding to emergency situations 24/7 while they're in front of their screen. So this is important for our company to have it that way, but from a volunteer and establish kiosks in these facilities. So where we have a workforce that doesn't have regular access to the internet, in their common space, in their lunchroom area, there's a VolunteerMatch kiosk, branded ADT Always Cares, so that on lunch breaks, on there. So that's been one really great workaround that we've had for our sales folks that are out in the field. They're in front of a computer screen, maybe just minutes a day, and they're on their mobile devices out in the field selling our product or installing our product. So working with VolunteerMatch again to create a mobilely enhanced version of our VolunteerMatch site so that they can peruse what's going on in their city while out on the go and sign up right there on the go. Another really great kind of adaptation. And I think thinking high tech, obviously we're on a VolunteerMatch webcast, but also thinking low tech. We have folks that aren't in front of screens all the time, so it's good for people to, when they're in front of a screen, to sign up for VolunteerMatch or sign up for a particular event through it. It could be, we do a lot of lunch and learns, bringing in nonprofit executives to speak during lunch or informal meetings in our facilities. Again, a way to connect low tech, but then driving people to the website to sign up for events, which is great. It makes you need to be very thoughtful of when you're actually scheduling volunteer events. And if they're all following on the same time of day, that's alienating maybe a third of your workforce. You got to think through that so that your program that you're rolling out is accessible to everyone, no matter when they might work. And then, of course, people that are in a sales capacity have kind of a 24/7 mindset, and they're always on the go. How then do you retrofit your program to be appealing to and relevant to someone like that who's thinking about leads and sales all the time? How then? And so those are the things that we have been thinking through and looking to customize our program, and people who are an hourly worker versus a commission versus a salary. So you got to be very thoughtful about that, so I urge you to think that through, especially at the beginning stage. Scaling up, I think that especially if you're in a larger organization, one thing you might consider that for us to really have success right off the bat, right, launching in a not trying to boil the ocean for us in a large company, but having success at our 7 largest sites, right, and learning from that, applying those learnings to our next phase, which we're in the middle of now, which has been really good. So we are applying these learnings, we're optimizing the program, we're doing it in a way that we can control, and it really allows us to make sure there's a high-quality experience, and we want to get company-wide in a reasonable amount of time, within a year, year and a half. So we're getting there, but we're doing it in a more controlled way initially. So it would look very different in your organization, I'm sure, but this might be a smart way to go about it, where you can have a lot of success.
Great, thanks so much, Alex. So one of the things that I just want to point out as we're kind of going through all of these different kind of viewpoints here, what you'll see is there are many different levels on which be looking and learn toward, access to technology and scheduling, and you want to make sure that you're kind of thinking about all of these different places where you need to really be learning about the differences between your employees. So we're going to keep things going, make sure we can get through everything. So Erin, tell us a little bit about that at NetSuite.
Sure. So I'm actually going to change over and talk about our pro bono program for this tip. So for the first tip, I talked about our hands-on program, Suite Impact Teams. But for this, I really wanted to talk about Suite Volunteers, because when we launched Suite Volunteers in 2012, we had the goal of creating a pilot. So whereas with our hands-on volunteering, we looked for kind of this flexible, locally driven campaign model. For Suite Volunteers, we knew that we needed to be able to achieve scale and achieve the ability to do a lot of pro bono every year. So we took a much more corporately driven formal program. We had a handful of grantees. These are the nonprofits using NetSuite through our donation program, who were occasionally coming to us and saying, I'm having an issue with X. Is there anybody that could help me? And we would, knock on the door of a person that we knew was a generous employee volunteer and ask them if they could help. Really not scalable, and we weren't achieving the goal of making this program accessible to our 450 grantees and our growing employee population. So we created Suite Volunteers to work on a quarterly basis, and every quarter an application goes out to our grantees and an application goes out to our employees, and that application sends them to VolunteerMatch, where they sign up and tell us what skills they have and what types of programs they could fulfill that quarter. We match them with the needs of our grantees to the application, and then they together work on that project for the course of the quarter. We decided to work on something that was small and specific, 20-hour projects per person, so that we could really achieve scale. And what you'll see is that by the end of last year, so the first full year of the program, we really did meet our preliminary goals. We had over 200 employees who volunteered and took on pro bono projects last year. They worked on teams to complete 80 different projects, which were for 55 unique organizations around the world. And the employees were from 15 different offices. So we were really excited to see that the way we set up this program really did work and make it accessible to all of our employees and all of our grantees. And I think there are a few keys that we thought were really, really important when we were creating a scalable program. One of them was that we started out by creating an advisory team of top-level managers from different departments so that they could help us define the program, and they could also help cheerlead the program within their departments. We built off of previous successes. So we looked at those handful of informal programs and said, which of those really worked, and how can we replicate that, and how can we create a mechanism that replicates that over and over and over again so that we can keep scaling up. We also really focused in on communications, trainings, and tools. So I will say that those are probably, in my mind, the three most important things when you're looking to create a global program that continually scales and gets bigger and bigger. You know, we sent really clear, really targeted email communications. We went old school like Alex and did flyers and posters and campaigns on our different digital monitors throughout our offices, and really appealed to employees, no matter where they worked, to get involved in pro bono. And we explained very clearly what the program was and how it worked so that everybody understood that. Our employees hear about Sea Volunteers on their first day in the office in new employee orientation, and they continue to hear about it basically every 30 days from my office. We also put in a mandatory training. So every employee who signs up, they go through a mandatory orientation and training each quarter, so that then if we have repeat employees, they train again and we're able to add new elements and new training to them. And then we create a template and toolkit for each of our volunteers so that when we really put them together with the grantee, we can take a step back and let the program run on its own. Because with scale, automation is also really important. And then, you know, as I said with the first program, we're continually measuring success and measuring things that weren't as successful and figuring out how we, you know, change the program and make the volunteers more empowered through those tools and templates and training so that they can continue to grow the program for us.
Awesome. Thanks so much, Erin. Keeping things going. So we just heard a lot about scaling internally, so going from, you know, one group of employees to another, you know, going globally, all of the internal stuff. And now we're going to kind of flip it around a little bit and talk about scaling from your employees to your customers with Jessica.
Perfect. So when you start to feel really great about your employee volunteerism and you want to take the leap into connecting with your consumers through your volunteer efforts, you have to dig deep into the essence of your business unit, your region, locations prior to making this jump. So that means you're surveying, you're conducting focus groups, you're making a lot of observations, collecting data. What did this look like at Prometheus? Really in partnership with VolunteerMatch and our consulting services that they provide and were absolutely essential for us. We took the time to assess what our neighbors were interested in participating in. There were a series of surveys. And as you probably know, most people actually don't want to volunteer with their landlord. Fortunately, what we found out was by digging deep into their behavioral and different demographics, we were able to actually dig into the sweet spot. So specific cities are going to be motivated differently. In Mountain View, California, for instance, all these crazy slides you see here, our neighbors are extremely family-oriented. They're incredibly committed to their pets, and they want to still do good in their community while having a little fun. So the result this year, as you see here, is the first ever Mountain View Pet Adoption Disco, which had dozens of volunteers, actually neighbors who were living locally in Mountain View to participate with us. We have families, we have kids, and most importantly, at the end of the day, the work we did resulted in 20 pets being adopted in literally 3 hours. So big stuff for us, and as you see here, people had a great deal of fun and has become a signature event, again, that we can duplicate in each of our regions over and over and over again.
Awesome. We love the disco cat. So we are about to go into tip number 3 here. So, and I realize that we are coming up on the hour. You know, I really think that we should, you know, just kind of charge through and try to get through tip number 3. You know, we'll probably go about 10 minutes over. So I hope everybody can stay on the line. If you can't, if you have to jump off for another call, don't worry. I will be sending the recording and the slides, so you'll get all the information if you miss any part of this tip number 3. But let's just keep going for now because I think it's really important. So we've touched on this a little bit kind of throughout all of our other tips. One of the things I love about this topic and this webinar and kind of how it organically came together is that all of our 3 tips really do kind of fit into each other. So you build your focused and strategic and flexible program, and then you scale it and grow it. And then how do you keep people engaged? How do you keep people coming back beyond just, you know, a one-time volunteer event? You use your volunteer champions and ambassadors internally to keep people excited and to keep communicating that program and the importance of it to your employees. So to get us started talking about ambassadors and champions, we'll have Alex tell us about that at ADT.
Great. Yeah, so the ambassador group I want to talk about here is the senior leadership group, which is so important, not only to having a successful launch, But if you want to sustain that success and that momentum year over year, you got to have that, right? So I think starting out with winning over key leaders, one of the things that we did that was, it was a lengthy, painful exercise because it took so long, but really paid off, was soliciting the input from all of our senior leaders at the get-go, at the very beginning of the process, literally interviewing them all, getting a sense of what their passions were, what they'd like to see in an employee volunteer program, and incorporated all that feedback that we could in the finished product. And it was a program then that they had a role in creating in a meaningful way. And that, I got to say, that was a very powerful thing that we did. That again was a lengthy process, but I'd encourage you to consider it. And you gotta make the business case, right, with senior executives, and the business case is there, thankfully. And the impact that a great program will have on your recruitment, on your retention, on job satisfaction, of course, on brand reputation, and all the external data. All the studies bear that out, and it's really great to remind your senior executives of that as you were pushing the program forward, to keep everybody focused on all the various pros that come with having a great program. And that process, by the way, never stops. We've learned, as you're making an impact in your initial years of a program, you always need to be making that case. And it's great because you have more and more information and more statistics and track records to make a stronger case. But one of the things that we did just recently, in fact this week, was a follow-up survey to all of our employees that have been impacted by Always Cares, about 7,000. We surveyed them in May prior to program launch, so before they were impacted by the program. And then again, same questions, same people, statistically relevant, and got our results back, about 8 months into the rollout to get a sense of how we were doing. And it was fantastic to see major jumps in employee satisfaction and the way employees view their company's commitment to their community and their service. And again, helps you make a greater case to grow a program. So that's something that we will always do, and again, encourage you to consider doing, and getting the baseline information if you can before your program starts, if that's possible. So also, getting them involved in a roll-up-your-sleeves way is important too, and to do it in a meaningful way that's not just for show, but your employee base really, really will appreciate it. And it's something you have to do through guiding them, proactively guiding executives to these volunteer opportunities, because of course they're so busy and their schedules can be really crazy. So we'll work with the executive assistants to get these opportunities on their calendar when we can. They always love the opportunity. We just need to help kind of orchestrate it happening. And when we do, and we do it all the time, is showcasing that effort. Luckily, my function sits within corporate communications, so it's very, very natural for us to capture video, great photography, showcase this on social media, on our intranet and all of our internal communication, and really just show to all 17,000 employees that this is a priority. And we hope that it'll be a priority for everyone, and they can see them going all the way to our CEO, Narendra Shahani, who's the gentleman right there in the center. It's a regular part of the quarter of the year, and we want to represent that. And then finally, we do a few major things, kind of standing big initiatives throughout the year, and we love to get one of our EL team members, one of our executive leadership team members, to actually be kind of the ceremonial team captain. And we know a senior executive is likely not going to have the time to really project manage anything, but to get them involved ceremoniously at the top, to be the kind of visible ringleader for whether it be Komen for the Cure. We do a big push for that. We do a big habitat challenge where all of our departments compete in a fun way to build homes. And we have someone in the C-suite that is kind of featured as the ringleader, the cheerleader, the leader for that initiative. And I'd say it's a pretty inspiring thing, and it really, we've gotten a lot of feedback that it's just really appreciated, and it reminds employees all the time that this isn't a priority for the company, that it's not a bolt-on program, but that it's integral to who we are. So I think, in the essence of time, let's talk about committees. I think the other critical ambassador group, and we actually, our entire program sits on a committee structure. So everywhere that we have, that we've rolled out the Always Cares program, and you can kind of see in the bottom right the 23 markets that we're now rolled out to, where we have a robust, trained official committee that's in place. And that's really the corporate headquarters staff. We guide, we teach, we instruct, we encourage, we strategize with these teams, but they're carrying, we fund these teams, but they're carrying it forth in their communities. And each team gets a visit from headquarters, usually a couple times a year, for ongoing training and motivation, and we also have a team captain structure, and that's someone that is the point person between headquarters and that local committee. We do monthly webcasts with all of our team captains to kind of update them on new best practices, any updates to VolunteerMatch, things like that. It's becoming, over time, it's becoming really something to be really proud of at ADT, and we really try to create it that way where it's a really well-respected role to take on. It's very visible in the company, but having the team captain also allows you to, at someone in our role and probably your role, to more easily manage and delegate on down to, which is very helpful. But I would just say another thing that we're in the process of creating, and you might consider, is really fun recognition programs. And so we're building this now in our first year, but a way to, at the end of the fiscal year, every year, to recognize our outstanding Always Cares participants through incredible acts of service, most hours, most projects led, and other criteria too. So that's the way to, again, make it really fun, make it really visible, create an aura within your organization where this is celebrated in a big way, and so that's really what we're driving towards with our committees.
Great, thanks, Alex. I think one of the questions that has kind of come in a few times over the course of the entire presentation was this asking how people are recruiting their champions or ambassadors, and I think that Alex made a really great point about making it something that's attractive for people to do, right? So making it something that's celebrated internally, something that is, they get recognition when they're involved as an ambassador or a champion, something that's honored as, an employee at your company or as somebody who's in senior leadership. So I think that's a really great tactic for recruiting those leaders and ambassadors. So next we'll hear about ambassadors at Prometheus.
So this is my absolute favorite subject to talk about. So how we ensure really strong engagement for our tiny program, and how we've really managed to turn the hard work of a traditional volunteer program into sort of a legacy program is by finding ambassadors, teaching them, and then letting them run. We did this through what we refer to as porch leaders, and really in every organization, especially on this call, there's going to be dozens of passionate people just waiting to lead the charge and get others to join in on the cause. Find these people in your company, give them the freedom to plan, organize, and execute killer events. And it's a little scary because you're going to have to let go of the reins a bit, but it actually can result in some pretty incredible stuff. For us at Prometheus, we have about 30 passionate Prometheans from both the field and our home office that we refer to, as I said, as porch leaders. This group went through an incredibly rigorous application process and an interview process, an 8-hour boot camp to learn all about how to host a volunteer event. Not only do they lead volunteer events using the tools like VolunteerMatch, as well as toolkits and T-shirts and things of that nature that we created, they also understand how to work with nonprofits directly. We have these nonprofits come and talk about what type of relationship they want to have with their clients. They really are the cheerleaders that encourage our vendors to get involved, and these kind of spur-of-the-moment volunteer opportunities that myself would have not known very much about. In 2013, what this looks like for us is we engaged in our largest cause marketing effort to date. So we called it Spreading the Ripple of Good by helping people with disabilities through the power of sports. We engaged local nonprofits in each of our regions and created a competition where we raised $79,000 in about 5 weeks through the help of Prometheans, neighbors, vendors, and just other partnerships. So further, keeping our efforts very localized meant we spread the ripple of good in very specific communities, and really expanding the program to our neighbors really ensured that that passion that our ambassadors really had continued to live on. So highly recommend doing that.
Helen, did you want to talk about your?
Oh, my second slide here.
Lots of these pictures.
So really briefly, I won't take up too much of your time, but I will say if you allow your, in our case, porch leaders or your ambassadors to kind of go on their way and do their own thing, you can actually see here that we had some particular passion out in Seattle for breast cancer awareness. This was them at the office showing people apartment communities and hosting events with little white Zinfandel and some pink desserts. But really at the end of the day, our cause was definitely brought to our neighbors, and their passion was really resonating throughout the Seattle community.
Great. Yeah, I think that one point that Jessica just made that I think is really important that I actually heard at I was recently at the Nonprofit Technology Conference last week, and in one of the sessions they were actually talking about volunteer champions and ambassadors and leaders within a nonprofit volunteer program. So how can you look at your volunteers and see, who really those leaders are that are going to champion your cause? And I think, a lot of those lessons are also applicable for a corporate volunteering program. And letting go was one of the big things that they talked about. You need to find your leaders, find your champions, and then kind of like let them run with it a little bit and let go a little bit, which is hard whenever you've designed and developed and grown this program, but is really important for making your champions feel empowered and also for preserving a little bit of your own sanity. So next we have Kate telling us about the CSR Liaison Program at JetBlue.
Yes. So our CSR Liaison Program was started in 2011. And we have, so a liaison is a term that is used all over the company. So we have like airport operations liaisons and ground crew liaisons. And it's a title that has a sense of pride for our crew members. So we created the program in partnership with our general managers at all the stations. And they selected, high-performing crew members who are interested in the community, and they get to determine who they are. Since we have 85 cities, and I'm the person that manages it, I wouldn't have the bandwidth to interview those people, so we outsourced it. And we asked them to be our voice locally, get a group of peers to work with you, build relationships with local nonprofits, very similarly to the other companies that have just spoken. But the one thing that I will say that we do for our CSR liaisons that helps make the program successful is, one, we hold an annual conference for them in an exciting destination. This year it was in Fort Lauderdale. They all got ocean view rooms. It was very exciting for them. And go over everything, answer all of their questions. They get paid for that piece by the airports, and the fact that they get to tell their peers, I'm going on a 2-day conference with CSR, we kick it off with a big volunteer event. So people who, are in Salt Lake that never get the chance to go to Columbia are getting to meet these people and talk about issues and see where things overlap and things don't overlap. So that gives us a good understanding of where we're falling short for providing the tools for our CSR liaisons. So one of the things is that a lot of people that work at the airports or are flying don't have access to a computer all the time. And we went old school and actually printed CSR liaison handbooks so we could have that as a reference tool for them. And that's actually proven really successful because it's something that they can store at the ticket counter if they're at the ticket counter, or they can have in the break rooms with them if all the computers are booked. And they really do an excellent job of bringing JetBlue outside of the airport into the community, especially for a company where we might only get 1 or 2 touch points with our customers every year. And it helps provide the community with showing that JetBlue is investing in it.
Great. Thanks so much, Kate. And I think, Kate touched on something that Jessica also touched on, really kind of having an actual tangible handbook, something that people can go back and refer to. I know, we're all trying to conserve and not, don't print as much as whatever as you can, but really having something physical in your hands can really make a difference. And I think also kind of your last bullet point here, making it fun, making it fun for your ambassadors or your champions as well. And so wrapping up here, we're going to have Erin tell us a little bit about the champions at NetSuite.
Great. Thanks to everybody who's sticking with us. I promise I'll try to go quickly. We actually have a lot of different champions, and so I kind of have my slide here, the more champions you have, the better your program, and the champions. And I think one of the really important things to think about your champions are, no matter who they are, if they're of it. It's really on you to kind of push these champions. So at NetSuite, for our Suite Impact teams, the hands-on volunteering, we have a couple different champions, the most important ones being our global ambassadors. Very similar to what you guys have heard from these other companies. These are employees who actually raise their hand and volunteer to lead our activities in their local office. We are currently refreshing that approach is that, sure, you have to train people and recruit people every year, but it means that the sphere of influence within the office is getting bigger and bigger. So, you know, you have we have our employees volunteer, raise their hands, and say, I want to be the ambassador. They read the job description, just as if they're applying to a new role in the company. And then they're selected by our CSR team and the local executives. And they're really the ones who are running these programs. But from the corporate team, you know, I'm constantly training them, supporting them, offering to help them with finding organizations and celebrating them as much as possible. Because it is a lot of work and it's a volunteer job on top of their everyday day-to-day. We also have quarterly meetings as a group because all of these people are in all these different offices. And I think, like Kate was talking about, you know, somebody in Singapore has likely never met somebody in the Melbourne office, but now they can talk on the phone together every quarter and share learnings and share lessons. And those calls are a really great way for us to surface things that are challenges that I can tackle for everyone and to share lessons learned. A few other quick mentions of different kinds of champions that we have at NetSuite. We have executive sponsors who often lend their name and take the role of sending out the email and engaging people in local events. So, you know, in our headquarters here, our head of HR will send out the event invitation inviting people to volunteer. The posters might even say, you know, join Chief People Officer at this event. That really helps with engagement throughout the organization. And then we have department champions who are, you know, people who come to us and say, I want to do a team offsite and I'd love it to be a Suite Impact event for my team. And then they really become a champion for us because they're engaging their entire department, you know, all 200 people in product, in going out and doing a volunteer event together. And because the executive of that team is a champion, that whole team gets exposure to volunteering. So then wrapping it up with our Suite Volunteer Pro Bono program, we have other champions. We have our advisory team, which I mentioned earlier. These are people who help us define and drive the program from each of our key departments. We also pair our employees up in junior and senior matches, so somebody who's done the program before will get paired with someone who hasn't. We ask our volunteers to share their pro bono stories on an ongoing grassroots basis every quarter in their team meetings and be, you know, just kind of a small ambassador and a small champion, just say what they did. And that first person story goes so far in getting people excited about your program. And then finally, this is one of my favorite things we actually do for this program. You can see a picture of it in the bottom right-hand corner of the screen. We come up with a thank you gift for each of our pro bono volunteers each year. And so last year what we came up with are these felt pennants like you get from your university that say Class of 2013. And these went out to every global employee who participated in pro bono. And so what I love is as I travel between our offices, I can just immediately see where my volunteers are. These pennants are pinned up on their offices from the Philippines to Toronto, and it makes a really great way to showcase those employees for what they've done, but also it's a conversation starter. So somebody comes over to their desk for a meeting, they'll be like, oh, cool, what is that? Wait, you did Sweet Volunteers? How does that program work? So you look for ways to just add, add elements and celebrate the people who participate in your program so that they can then go forth and champion the programs for you.
That's great, yeah. And I think that, one of the kind of 2 points that Erin made that I think are really important is to ask them, if you never do, then how would you ever know? And then the second is they don't have to be necessarily appointed. People who participate in your programs, regardless of whether they're a formal champion or ambassador or not, can still be an ambassador of your program by providing recognition and providing. Okay, so Q&A. We are already 15 minutes over, and just to be, I guess, cognizant of people's time and not to keep everybody on the line too much longer, we have a ton of great questions that have come in over the course of the hour, or hour and 15 minutes. And so what we're going to do is, since we're already at 11:15 Pacific, we're going to skip the Q&A live, but I promise we will figure out a way to get your questions answered, whether that's following up with you directly or putting it into a blog series or maybe even a follow-up webinar, because there are really. And so just to wrap things up, just to remind everybody, there are other ways that you can stay involved in our resources aside from just our webinars. You can follow us on our blog at volunteeringatcsr.org, on Twitter at VM_solutions, and sign up for our monthly Good Companies newsletter. You can sign up for that on our blog or on solutions.volunteermatch.org. Featuring Chris Jarvis of Realize Work, and he's going to be talking to us about his concept of transformative value and how your employees' beliefs and opinions about the value of what they're doing really can transform the way that your company can impact communities. So make sure that you save the date for that, and whenever you get the follow-up slides here, you'll see that the registration link is on that last slide for you. So with that, I'm going to go ahead and wrap things up. I want to thank everybody for joining us this morning and for staying a few minutes extra. Thank you so much to Erin and Jessica and Kate and Alex for being part of this webinar. Some really amazing information and tips and just really, really great stuff this morning. So thank you guys all so much for all of your hard work and for joining us. And we'll see you all next time. Have a great afternoon, everybody.